Before we were free. Chapter 10. Freedom Cry. Pages 138 to 143. Anita, por favor. Mommy calls from the other room. Turn that thing off. I'm sitting in front of the television at the Hotel Beverly, where my grandparents have been renting an apartment on top of floor. We've been in New York City already for over a month and a half. I marked off every day on the calendar. Today, I made such a heavy X that I tore through the paper. September 18, 1961. Isn't even over, but it's already gone. The days are getting cooler. Down on the street, 10 flights below, the little toy trees are beginning to turn reddish, like someone is lighting a match to them. Every time I get a chance, I watch TV. I tell mommy that I want to learn more about this country. But really, I just want to keep my mind off everything I could be worrying about right now. Like the phone call mommy is about to make from the other room. Twice a week, she calls Mr. Washburn in Washington to find out if there's any news about Pappy and my uncle. We'll all sit around, my grandparents, Mamita and Papito, Lucinda and Mundine, and me, watching the reactions on her face. With Mr. Washburn, por favor, I hear Mommy saying. I go up to the television to turn it off. And just then, she comes on. The only Spanish lady I've ever seen on TV. There's also a Cuban guy called Ricky Ricardo, who has a wacky American wife who reminds me of Mrs. Washburn. This lady carries a back basket of bananas on her head like the marchantas in the market calling out their wares. I turn down the volume and sing along under my breath. The first time I saw her, I couldn't believe what she was saying. I'm Anita Banana and I'm here to stay. No! I scream at the TV and clap my hands over my ears. I'm not staying! I'm not staying! Lucinda ran into the room. ¿Qué pasa? What on earth are you screaming about, Anita? Thank goodness Mommy and Mamita and Papito were out with Mundine, getting him a winter jacket. Otherwise, my screaming would have shot their fragile nerves. You want us to get thrown out of here? I nodded and then shook my head. Of course, I didn't want to get thrown out and sent back to live in a closet, but I wanted the dictatorship to be over so we could go home to live as a family again. The lady, I said, pointing to the silent screen. What about her? Lucinda asked, turning the volume back up. She watched the rest of the commercial. You're crying about her? No, not about her, about what she said. I explained the lady's prediction as if the television were a crystal ball. Lucinda let out of her long suffering sighs. Ay, Anita, that's not what she's saying. Lucinda whirled her hips, imitating the lady. She's saying, Chiquita banana, no Anita banana. And she's here to stay, to say, not to stay. I guess my nerves were pretty shot too. I'm still seeing ghosts and signs everywhere, and Chucha isn't around to help me interpret them. I'm so sorry to be molesting you, Mr. Washburn. Mommy is saying as I come into the room. Lucinda has explained to her that molestar doesn't mean bother in English as it does in Spanish. But Mommy says, how is she supposed to remember all the crazy ways the Americans have changed Spanish around? Sometimes, sad as I am, even I have to smile at Mommy. Yes, I understand. Yes, Mr. Washburn, Mommy is saying. With each yes, I can hear her voice getting weaker. Her knuckles are bone white from holding the receiver so tight. So, no news is no good news. You're right. We're so much in gratitude to you, she says at the end. Nothing. Mommy says quietly after she hangs up. They're trying to put some pressure on Trujillo Jr. to leave the country. Then the prisoners will be released. We just have to keep hoping and praying, she adds more cheerfully. She doesn't sound very convinced. Exactamente. My grandfather agrees, trying to inject confidence into all of us, but my grandmother begins weeping. Mis pobres hijos, mi pobre país, her poor sons, her poor country. Lucinda joins in, and before long, Mommy and I are also crying. Mundine hurries off to the bathroom, where I'm sure he cries too. My grandfather puts on his overcoat and heads for the drugstore to get my grandmother some more of her blood pressure medicine. I want to go with him, but I can't because it's sort of illegal that we're staying in their rooms with them, as they have to pay more. Papito has told the doorman, who's Puerto Rican, that ours is a temporary situation, and the doorman says he understands. Just be discretos. So we try to be discreet and go out one by one so it doesn't look like we know each other, but we're just separate people staying in the hotel rooms on the lower floors. I go stand by the window and watch for Papito to come out downstairs, an old man in a Panama hat. One of the few familiar faces in this country where the only people we know are the ones who came with us. The day we were surprised in our hiding place. I had no idea that it would be my goodbye to my country. I actually thought the scene had discovered us and it was a goodbye to my life. That's why, as scared as I was, I kept writing in my diary. I wanted someone to know what had happened to us. But when the crawl space doors were thrown open, it was Wimpy and his paratroopers coming to the rescue. The Mancinis, who were away at the beach, didn't know that the airlift would be that day. A number of things had to fall in place for our evacuation, and that Sunday, July 30, they came together at the last minute. I had been out to stash away my diary under a loose board, but Wimpy grabbed me and picked me up, and the diary came away in my hand. An unmarked helicopter was waiting on the embassy grounds to airlift us out, and there wasn't a minute to spare. Outside on the streets, an angry rally was going on, and the scene were too busy with crowd control to notice a dragonfly helicopter flying by with a terrifying mother and a daughter inside. North of the city, we landed on an abandoned airstrip where a cargo plane was waiting. A van dropped us with some other people, some of whom I recognized. Wimpy helped everyone climb on board, a grim look on his face. His eagle tattoo pumping away. As our airplane took off, I glanced out the window at the cracked tarmac and the swaying palms waving goodbye, and I thought I saw a flash of purple getting back into the van with Wimpy. We flew higher and higher over green valleys and dark, rich mountains, and then over the coast, waves breaking on the white sands. Miles below, Oscar was in one of those tiny beach houses, maybe looking up. How long before he returned home? Would he realize right away that I was no longer hidden in his parents' closet using his Queen of Hearts to mark my place in the Swiss family Robinson? So many people and places I might not ever see them again. Looking down, I saw a quilt of faces and memories spreading out over the sea. Moncito carrying our sack of plátanos in his wheelbarrow, Tío Pepe with his white socks, Porfirio watering the ginger plants while singing his sad songs, and the purple thread stitching piece to piece was Chucha, my dear Chucha, who had helped me survive these years of my life falling apart. I stared out the window, too shocked even to cry, until we climbed into the clouds and there was nothing else to see. A little while later, I leaned against Mommy and fell asleep. When she shook me away, it was dark outside the plane, We had landed. Somehow I stumbled into my half sleeve across a runaway, Mommy holding on to me to a bigger airplane taking us to New York City. The next I knew, I was looking down at the view and I had seen on the postcards Lucinda sent to us that left even Chucha speechless. Buildings so tall that I couldn't quite believe they were real, and patches of green like scattered rocks, and tiny ant-like people who I could blot out just by putting my hand on the small square of the window. How could I live in this world full of strangers and great light instead of a country of cousins and family friends and year-round sunshine? We landed and entered a terminal where officials took us a room to issue us special papers. Then one of them shook our hands and said, "Welcome to the United States of America," and pointed out of immigration. And there was my answer to how I would survive in this strange new world. My family was waiting for us, Mundine and Lucinda, my grandparents, Carla, her sisters, and Tia Laura, and Tio Carlos, and Tia Mimi, all of them calling out, "Anita, Carmen." Carla says my face was worth $1,000 as the family rushed forward and locked us in their arms. By the end of September, we still have no news of Papi and Tio Tony. The Garcias have invited us to move out to their house in Queens, but Mommy won't hear of it. Any day now, we will be returning home. The campus suburbs are for those who have decided to settle down in the United States like the Garcias. New York City is where you stayed on your way back to where you came from. While we are waiting around, Mommy decides that we should learn perfect English. Lucinda already is a pro from being here since February, but Mundine and I could use practice. Papi will be so pleased, she says excitedly. There is an uneasy silence when she says these things, but I so want to believe her that I'll do anything that might help this happen. Mommy goes to a nearby Catholic school and asks the principal if we can sit it on any class till we go back home. The principal is a nun with a bonnet-like baby doll, except glad. She's a sister of charity, and maybe that's why she's so kind and says, yes, she will put us wherever there's a spot.